Okay, we'll make a start. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you all. Welcome to the July Planning Committee meeting. First item is apologies for absence. Have we had any apologies for today's meeting?
We have apologies from Councillor Smith today.
Okay, we'll record Rebecca's apologies. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. I am assuming everyone's filled them in, but can we record any at this stage that anyone wants to let us know of? No. As ever, if any present themselves during the meeting, just catch my eye and we'll get those on the record. Anything on the minutes from last time? 14th of June was when we last met. If there's no issues, I will sign them off. And Tina, if you could pass them over again, I'd be grateful. Chair's urgent business. I'd like to say a very, very warm welcome to Councillor Paul McNamara, his first planning committee meeting. Hopefully not the last as well. I'm sure you'll enjoy your time here. Do we have any questions from members of the public today?
No questions, Chair.
Okay, that takes on then to item 6 and the planning applications. The first one is at page 7, and we're at 17 Kingston Close. And this is here, I think, Luke, because this is an employee. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah. So I don't want to take up everyone's time unnecessarily. Are there going to be any questions on this application? If so, we'll hear the details. Okay, if not, we'll move to the decision. The recommendation, as you can see, is to grant conditionally. So if we can make our decisions then. Okay, that's agreed. Thank you very much indeed. 6.2 is next. Page 13. And we're at 23 Honeyknoll Lane. And likewise, Luke, this is an employee application, hence it being here.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Again, are there any questions or issues people want to raise at this stage? Okay, we'll move to the decision then. The recommendation, as you can see it on page 13, is to grant conditionally. Again, if we can all vote now, please. Okay, that's agreed as well. Thank you very much. 6.3 is next. That's page 19. And we've moved to the land adjacent to 18A Torland Road. And Sam, whenever you're ready, please.
Yeah, it's just loading the presentation.
Yeah, that's fine.
A second. The application before members today is the alteration of 2 previously approved dwellings, which were given outline consent in 2014, and the final details later approved via reserved matters application in 2018. The current application seeks to alter condition 1 of the 2018 approval to change the appearance of the dwellings and the wider layout of the site. The application looks to make no change to the site's access arrangements, which were previously approved as part of the original outline consent. The application has been referred to the committee by Councillor Mahoney due to the proposed felling of a protected tree within the site. The site is a sloping grassy area which sits to the sits to the north of Torland Road and the south of Manamead Road, adjacent to Blindman's Wood. The site is accessed from Torland Road via an existing driveway to 18A Torland Road, which is also adjacent to the site. So that's the aerial shot of the site there, with the sort of aerial mapping and just more zoomed in there from our mapping system, just showing the extent of the site. Torland Road to the south there, Manamead Road to the north. So go through the site plans of the site. So the first site plan on screen shows the approved layout of the site. This was a layout approved back in 2018, with 2 long fin dwellings sitting towards the front of the site at a relative distance from the boundary of number 18A, which is to the right of the screen, as you can see there. These dwellings are approved and following the discharging of some outstanding planning conditions could be built. The second site plan shows the overall layout now proposed. Members should note the differences between the 2 designs, including the more central overall location of the 2 dwellings and the difference in shape. The properties would sit further back from the southern boundary, but closer to the eastern boundary with 18A. The change of layout proposed would necessitate the aforementioned felling of a protected tree, which sits to the east of the site adjacent to 18A's boundary. Relating to this tree, the Natural Infrastructure team were consulted on the scheme and have not raised any objections to its felling. Whilst officers would generally be resistant to felling a protected tree, evidence was provided as part of the application which states that the tree is in poor health. A visit by the Natural Infrastructure team confirmed this, and as such, officers consider that its removal would be acceptable. Under policy Dev 28 of the Joint Local Plan, officers would be able to seek replacements to be planted. 8 trees would be required under the aforementioned policy, and the planting of such would be conditioned should approval be granted. The same condition would request final landscaping details of the wider site, including species and locations of the proposed trees. Moving on to some 3D visualizers, the following slides show the approved and proposed schemes. These are the 2 dwellings which were previously approved with their long, slightly ramp-like design. And the next 3 show the proposed dwellings, which would have a layered design to respond to the site's sloping topography. The first view, this one here, is from the site's entrance to the east, showing the visible ground and first floors, while the second 2 views are from more northern points of the site, revealing the lower ground floors cut into the hill. This final set of visualizers shows the proposed dwelling from a number of angles within the kind of wider context of the site. Despite the modern design proposed, officers considered that the design would be acceptable. The approved dwellings are quite modern in appearance, and the site is largely screened from view due to Torland Road properties to the south and the large tree line to the north. The principle of erecting 2 properties on site has already been established from a visual impact perspective too. Moving on to the floor plans, the 2 properties would be the same size and design, albeit mirror images. The lower ground floors would house bedrooms, with a further bedroom on the ground floors, along with large open-plan kitchen diner. The main living room with access out onto a roof terrace would occupy the first floors. Both properties would have a large carport as well as other hard standing space for parking. Amenity space would be provided by roof terraces, rear balconies and a green space area towards the front of the properties. Solar panels are also proposed for the property's roofs. So as you can see, the 2 properties are essentially the same, just flipped. This next slide shows the relationship to neighbouring properties. Whilst the application has been referred to committee largely due to the proposed tree felling, officers have received 2 letters of representation raising amenity concerns. This slide demonstrates the relationships that the properties would have to the nearby properties on Torland Road. The sloping site would mean that the proposed properties would sit much lower down compared to the existing properties on Torland Road. As such, officers considered that the amenity impacts of the proposal would not be significant, as the proposed properties would not lead to an overbearing presence at the rear of the site and would not be in a position to significantly overlook neighbouring gardens due to existing boundary treatments and the level differences. Officers also considered that the properties and their roof terraces have been designed in a way which would funnel views northward towards Mannermead Road, as the majority of the windows and the bulk of the terraces are angled in such a direction. Again, the principle of having properties on site has already been established from an amenity perspective. Just moving on to a few site photos. All of these photos are taken from the southern end of the site, i.e. at the top of the slope. This is looking towards the west, and this is looking towards the east with the tree, the main tree. I don't know if my cursor's going to show on here. No, it's not. But the tree, so the house you can see there to the right of the picture is number 18A, and the tree immediately adjacent to that is the tree which is proposed to be felled. And that's the same angle, some slightly further around. So again, from the top of the hill with the boundary to the neighbouring properties on Torland Road there to the right, the sort of hedgerow that you can see there. In conclusion, officers consider that the design of the proposed properties would be acceptable and that their overall scale is appropriate for the site. Officers are also of the view that the amenity impacts on neighbouring properties would not be significant and that existing boundary treatments and the slope of the land would limit impacts. Officers are also content for the protected tree to be felled due to its poor condition and the likelihood that it would need to be felled in due course regardless of the outcome of this application. Officers consider that suitable mitigation for its loss can be conditioned, which would lead to overall benefits in terms of tree cover and biodiversity. As such, officers recommend that the scheme be approved, with conditions applied to provide the final planting and landscaping details, details of the site's surface water drainage provisions, provisions of parking areas and associated EV charging, and to remove many of the dwelling's permitted development rights to limit what further work could be undertaken to the properties without planning permission.
Sam, thank you very much. We have two speakers on this one, and our first is Councillor John Mahoney. If you'd like to make your way down, no stranger to the Planning Committee. You're welcome, John. 5 minutes, as you know, will be yours. Would you like to be told when only one is left? Okay, over to you.
Right, thank you, Chair and Committee, and thank you for the opportunity of coming to speak to... Oh, right. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for the opportunity to speak to you on this planning application, which has a long history, to say the least. The three issues that have concerned myself and the residents are the cedar tree, the pedestrian footpath that goes down between the houses, numbers 22 and 24, and the safety of pedestrians when the construction is being undertaken, and also long-term. Regarding the tree, I mean, it's a beautiful tree. Trees are quite sensitive things. I'm interested to know if it was given a TPO at one point, why and when was this given, because it's certainly a long time ago, and I think it's because there was an attempt to remove it previously. Also, there's been extensive, I was going to say pruning, but I think it was sort of hatcheting of one side of the tree. If it had a TPO, why has this been allowed to happen? Was there permission given? And if not, was there any enforcement? Because there's certainly been a long-standing attempt, well documented, for the removal of this tree. What do you replace it with? Apple trees has been suggested. I don't think it's of quite the same order as the tree that's there. Also, great concern, the photos we've seen looking down to Manamede Road are in winter when there's very little tree cover, and actually you get quite a good view. When we went yesterday, all the trees are in full leaf, and there's very little view, and I'd be worried that actually there might be an attempt to remove a lot of the existing non-TPO trees to the north of the site. Going back to the path between 22 and 24 Torland Road, that's been there since the houses were built 70, 80 or more years ago. It is used to gain access to Blind Man's Wood and also onto Outland and Manamede Road. It's well used by residents for dog walking and also to gain shortcut access to the other two roads rather than walking the long way round other residential streets. How can this be preserved? Also, there is the electricity substation at one end of the plot nearest Blind Man's Wood. Once this building has been installed, or buildings, there will be no vehicular access to it, only pedestrian access down this little narrow lane. Is that satisfactory? Electricity substations don't often blow up, but I know that they do, and then presumably quite significant machinery or equipment will have to be moved in to replace it. I don't think there'll be much fun if the lights go out in Hartley for an extended period. Also, the driveway that accesses 18A at the moment is long and narrow, and there's no visibility either for pedestrians walking along Torland Road or when you're driving up the steep, narrow driveway of who may be on the pavement, and particularly if we're moving towards quieter electric cars, this could be a real problem. Also, how will construction be conducted? There's no way you would get big lorries down there. Even small lorries would pose a problem. So I brought this to committee because there are concerns in the area, and I have concerns about the tree, about the establishment of the pedestrian access to the woods and beyond, issues with the electricity substation should there be any significant problem, and also safety for pedestrians during construction and afterwards. So I trust that my concerns can be mitigated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Our second speaker is Mr. Davis. There we are. You're very welcome to join us, sir. 5 minutes will be yours too. Would you like to be told when 4 have gone? Yeah. Okay, in your own time, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting us come and speak in relation to this application. I would first put forward that most of the issues that were brought up by the previous speaker are not material planning considerations. The tree, which is the main reason that this was brought forward, as previously mentioned, is ill and has been understood by your experts in the council to be suitable to be removed. What wasn't also presented was we submitted with the application a structural engineer's report that says that the tree is currently undermining the boundary wall and the roots are also protruding underneath the host dwelling. The combination of those things would actually allow that tree to come down under a 5-day notice, which we didn't put in because the application is in. So the tree itself shouldn't be a question. The footpath that comes down from Torland Road is in the ownership of the application. It's not a public footpath. It has been used by the locals via trespassing for a period of time, but again, it's not a material consideration of this planning application that trespassing should be continued to be allowed down that footpath. The overlooking and questions have been dealt with in the drawings have been provided to show that there's no overlooking and there's no encroachment on the existing dwellings that are there. Questions about access from the site and for end users are not relevant. As there will be 2 houses built there, whether it's these 2 houses or the 2 houses that are permitted an extent that the permission exists for. So that question cannot be relevant. In terms of construction and construction access, again, not a material planning consideration, but a construction management plan could be a condition that you would put on this application to ensure that everybody's happy that that's being met. But again, this is clear to remember that this is not an application for 2 new dwellings. It's an application to amend the appearance on 2 houses that are granted, that have extant permission. They've been commenced, building control is in place on them, and 2 dwellings will be built there. The 2 dwellings that could be built there that are extant will not, they are under an old building control application. They will not have the same level of insulation. They will not have the same sustainability. What these 2 dwellings do bring is a very well insulated connection of 2 buildings that have the photovoltaics that would meet the joint local plan's sustainability requirements. So this is, in planning terms, these houses offer a planning gain, and that is, the gist of it. There will be houses there, so we need to understand that, and these offer planning gain in their sustainability, and they're set down further. The materials are more appropriate. It's a better application. All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Davis, thank you very much indeed, sir. It's now open to us as a committee. I think it's only fair, I see some hands already, and that's absolutely fine, if we put some of the issues raised already to our officers, and as well as Sam, we have Alan, who's all things trees, I'm told, so Alan will be able to help us there. And that's probably a good place to start. We've heard conflicting descriptions of the tree, the state of the tree, and so on. Could you, between us, or between you, I should say, bring us up to speed on your thoughts, guys?
Thanks. Hi, yeah, I was asked to go and have a look at the tree, so I've been to site twice now to have a look at it.
Alan, can you bring it a bit closer to you? Thanks ever so much.
It is a cedar tree, so it's a non-native exotic tree. It will have very limited ecological value. It won't have many associated wildlife associations with it. When we looked at it on site yesterday, it was very clear that it had been sided up. So 1/2 of the canopy has been removed where it overhangs 18A Torland Road, so it doesn't have a natural canopy. It also has a significant area of dieback in the crown. I'd say probably between 10 and 15% of the existing crown is dead. So it's had half the canopy removed from one side. In addition, it's got dieback of 15% of that remaining canopy. So it won't be thriving and it won't be making a lot of energy and food for itself. So I don't believe it'll be storing a lot of carbon. If an application came in under the TPO legislation to have the tree removed, I think Plymouth City Council would find it very hard to resist such an application because of the tree's condition. I'm not concerned about it growing under the wall, and I don't believe it's growing under the house. If it was a good tree, I'd be saying, you know, the tree has priority over the wall, take the wall down or repair the wall. But in this case, it's a pretty poor tree. It's got dieback. As I say, if an application was submitted to fell the tree, I don't think we'd be able to resist that because of its condition, because of its proximity to 18A. It's worth bearing in mind that if this tree remained and it was removed under TPO legislation, we could only insist on one replacement tree, and that replacement would have to be a like-for-like tree, so it'd be another exotic conifer. Through this application, we can have this tree removed and have 8 other trees put in its place. My suggestion would be to have 8 other trees within the red line area that are native, fruit-bearing, flowering, so they attract pollinators and things, and increase the biodiversity of the site. The site is right next to Blind Man's Wood and a verge planting. They are all native broadleaf trees, and this tree is rather incongruous, I think, the conifer. So I think even if it was a good, healthy, mature tree, I think it would be out of context with the rest of the landscape. So my opinion and my advice to the planning department was that this tree should be allowed to go. We can then secure 8 replacement trees, increase the biodiversity of the site, and that this site can then feed into Blind Man's Wood. Any questions?
Okay, well, hang on. Sam, is there anything you want to add tree-wise at this point?
No, Alan's covered everything perfectly, thank you.
We'll go through the issues raised by the speakers, and then everyone will have ample time, I assure you of that. The next one was the footpath access, which we heard about yesterday, but I don't think we actually saw. But where are we in terms of that being related to this application, please?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to get the proper Google Maps up, but for some reason the computer's just not playing ball at the moment. But the footpath is, you can just about see it on here. It's here. So it runs from Torland Road through to and terminates at the site there. So it's, you know, it's a footpath which is outside of the scope of the site. It's not an official public right of way. It's not owned by the council or maintained by the council. So I suppose its use is at the behest of the landowner rather than anybody else. The application is not seeking to close this up or nothing has been stated in that they're looking to remove the footpath access. So as far as we're concerned, there's no change on that front. The way that the site, I'll get the site plan up. So this is the footpath here, the entrance to the footpath. So as you can see, the sort of main bulk of the site is set back slightly. So I imagine you're going to come on to the substation, so I'll just do that now because it's part of the same part of the same issue. So I have spoken to National Grid, and their plans show that they require access down this footpath and around to the substation, which would be maintained. You could still walk around here and down to the substation. They don't require vehicular access to this. They confirm that the access that they have on their plan is all that they require. And I suppose like with any case, if vehicular access was required, if they needed to crane something in, then they would need to arrange that with the landowner, like you would with any other private land issue.
The next issue, or the final one, because you've covered the electricity station, is construction traffic.
Yeah, so I was just trying to flag to Carly to point this out, but I didn't realise you were going to talk to it. The original outline consent has a condition on it which requires a code of practice and management plan to be submitted and agreed. So that's already covered by the original outline, and one hasn't been submitted at this stage, but to proceed from here, one would need to be submitted and agreed. Because
Councillor Mahoney used the word mitigation, would it be in order for us, and it's probably a question for Natalie as much as anybody, if we were to approve the application today, given what Sam's just said about, was that attached to the outline?
The original outline consent, yes.
Could we attach a different one, maybe giving ward councillors a say, or would the one that's attached to the outline permission trump everything, if you can follow that?
I mean, it would be the one that attached to the outline permission originally that would be the guiding principle on this one.
How much? Take our mics off. We only got limit. There we are. Would there be any leeway for us to add to or subtract from that condition if we were to give permission to what's in front of us today? What I'm thinking is, it's quite common when we have potential controversy with construction to have the code of conduct approved or at least consulted with the ward councillors before it's approved by the planning authority. So were someone to suggest that today, would that be okay to attach that as a condition to this permission if it gets that far?
We wouldn't be able to amend the condition on the outline consent because that's not the application before us now, but we could add an additional condition. So when they come to discharge their conditions, they would effectively discharge both at the same time, and we could add some extra wording to the condition we add to this one.
That's helpful, thank you. Okay, we've taken up enough time here. James was first.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question, but then also a possible condition, if we could discuss that afterwards. The question's obviously in terms of the tree, and in terms of paragraph 8.13 of the Climate Emergency Planning Statement, the setting out the protecting of green spaces and greenfield sites and tree cover. So are you content that if this tree were to be removed, that it fulfills the criteria or the suggestions set out in the Climate Emergency Planning Statement?
I come in there. I think given that we're removing one tree and replacing it with 8, obviously different maturities, but so unless Alan says that, I would say we're confident it would, yes.
No, I thought that might have been the case. I just wanted to lay that out and just to make clear. In terms of the condition, in response to that, I'm happy not to proceed for the minute, but I'll give a thinking if I could come back at the end, if that's okay.
By all means,
Thank you, Chair.
That's fine. Okay for now? Yeah. Ian Darcy, excuse me.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for the clarification. We discussed many of these issues yesterday, so it's been really helpful, thank you, and reduces the number of questions I had just to
I think it would help just for the record and perhaps for Natalie's blood pressure. So we didn't discuss any issues, we asked technical questions of the officers.
Absolutely. Indeed, Chair. The one thing I'd like to explore, if I may, notwithstanding the original, the grant of the original application, is there scope to condition the remaining trees if the tree that we're speaking of is felled and replaced by the 8 saplings, which I understand, but the tree line that exists on the northern border, I understand they're not protected. Could they be conditioned that they remain?
So we have on the report a condition which would, it's a standard condition which I can read to you. Bear with me 1 second. Where am I? So we can include a condition which, so generally we would include a condition which members can choose if they wish to, which would kind of protect, trees during the, during construction process. I mean, we wouldn't, I suppose, if you wanted to protect a tree in the long term, it would tend to be TPO'd, and it's my understanding that, the NPPF isn't particularly keen on us long-term protecting trees through a planning condition. However, it's perfectly possible for us to condition that they would be retained, they would be protected during the construction process, and usually these conditions would last for a period of time, usually 5 years is my understanding for how that would work. Obviously then beyond that, I suppose if either the applicant or yourself or anyone wanted to apply for those to be protected, then that could go through that process as part of that.
Thank you, Sam. So, Chair, it would be my desire to attach a condition of that nature, and provided that's supported, of course, in due course, I'd be advancing that. Thank you.
So that's helpful, Ian. Thank you. So, in terms of this 5 years, you mentioned 5 years, and also during the construction period. Are we saying then that if, as I assume, if it gets permission, construction lasts less than 5 years, the protection on the trees that Ian's talking about would remain? So construction's over, all the construction people have gone, people have moved into the new houses, that's a lot less than 5 years, the trees are still protected.
Yeah, there's two issues here really. There's protecting the trees during the developmental process. We usually have a standard condition we put on there asking that the trees are protected in accordance with British Standard 5837, which requires the implementation of a fence line, a protected area around the trees, and nothing associated with development can happen inside of that. That's usually only until the development is completed. So we're then looking at long-term retention. Regulations are absolutely clear that we shouldn't be using conditions for long-term retention of trees. If we think they're suitable for long-term protection, we should be using tree preservation orders. And actually, if they're only protected by condition and they are felled in breach of that condition, then we're only looking at breach of condition. Whereas if they're felled under TPO regs illegally, then that is a criminal offence. So that kind of focuses people's minds a little bit. So if we're wanting to long-term retain those trees, a tree preservation order would be the way to go. I mean, I can't imagine that anybody would want to take them down because they are a really good screen to Manmead Road. But if we absolutely want to ensure that those trees are there for the long term, the tree preservation order is the only way to go.
Did you want to? I think we're all in agreement with what you're looking to achieve, Ian. I'm just trying to work out the best way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the question was clear: is there scope to put a condition in? Yeah. I'm satisfied that there is scope to put a condition in. As to whether, in the long term, a TPO would be more appropriate, you know, I welcome other members' views, but I'm keen to, if it's approved today, that the condition that the trees in existence remain. Is there scope for an informative to say that although we as a committee today don't have the power to put TPOs on, it's the committee's view, if that turns out to be the case, that that's what we would like to happen, even though that's outside the scope of our powers today?
We could certainly add an informative. What weight that would hold in the TPO process? Probably very little, I would imagine, Alan. Yeah.
I think probably the way to go is to put on the condition to protect the trees, wait until development is completed, and then make a reassessment. And at that point, we can serve a TPO if we think it's warranted.
Okay.
I think that's the most pragmatic way to proceed. So
that seems to be, and I'm not seeing any shaking heads around, so can I just, for the record, I'm happy to second Ian's proposal. Can I take it that we're all in favour of that? Yeah, okay, so we'll add that as a condition. You got that, thank you ever so much. Cathy was next.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 points. First of all, I'm having difficulty because I can't find I haven't been able to find the original outline planning consent and what conditions are attached to that. So it's very difficult then to know what sort of conditions one should then suggest should be attached to this, this new application. And I'll make that by way of comment because I know I'm supposed to have a blinkered view on this. Secondly, with regard to the trees being, or the planting scheme, landscaping scheme, can this be conditioned that this is actually done prior to any further building work being carried out at this stage, and that when the trees are planted, there's any dieback at all, then a fresh tree will be put in its place?
Yeah, so I mean, the way the condition's been worded currently is that the planting details would be agreed, kind of pre-occupation of the properties, and then the planting would be undertaken in the next kind of relevant planting season. However, if members wanted to have this agreed earlier, more of a pre-commencement condition, then that would be up to the committee to decide. I mean, ultimately, we wouldn't want the trees to be planted prior to any building works. That would really, that wouldn't particularly be good for the trees. But if members wanted that agreed earlier in the process, then we could look to do that. I don't know if Alan has anything to add to that.
Could we ensure that they were planted before any occupation of the premises?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, if members wanted to alter the condition in that way, then I don't see why that's not possible.
Again, I'm not detecting any. Is it on Kathy's point? Because I'd like to. Yeah, by all means, Patrick.
Yeah, so I think I'm fully supportive, and I indicated to speak, and I would have asked for it to be pre-commencement. I think tying the developer down to say prior to occupation, they may wish to occupy the dwelling in the wrong time of the year for a planting season. So I think, you know, you could be tying the developer up, and I'm not on the developer side in any way, but you could find that a substantial period of the year you're waiting for the planting season. So I'm not sure, although it's a bit, the vagaries of planting seem to be changing every season. You ask the council to plant a tree. It always used to be from September to February, and now they seem to do tree works all year round. So you might, Alan, give some advice on tree planting. Generally, there's a season for tree planting, as far as I'm aware. So is it fair and reasonable that we should say you can occupy the property until the planting season?
I mean, as long as the condition meets Circular 1197 and, you know, it's a reasonable, enforceable, we can put any condition on there we please. The planting season is usually between November and February at the moment. I think most conditions that I see for tree planting usually say on completion of development, so not tied to occupancy at all. So as soon as the development is completed and signed off, at that point we usually say the following planting season, following completion. So that would be waiting until the next available planting season. You can plant all year round. You can plant potted trees. The success rate is very low and they require a lot of maintenance. So we usually just ask for bare-rooted whips to go in the winter.
It's in both of your hands at the moment in terms of what you want to suggest as a way forward.
I would suggest we have a condition on that replanting takes place following the planting season following completion of the development.
I'll certainly be happy with that, as long as we enforce it. I'm very happy to support that.
Kathy, you raised the subject. Does that meet with your...
Yeah, Chair, I think it's a question of it making sure it is enforced and somebody checks up, you know, immediately it's supposed to happen, and it does happen.
Could we just pass that on to our enforcement colleagues? I know we're a bit of a way off today from that position, but I think it's only fair to everybody concerned, not least John Mahoney, Councillor Mahoney and his constituents, that we do just that. So that's, no, I think we might minute that actually, just for our own reassurance. Patrick, did you want to come in on a separate point?
Well, I think probably not. I think the point I wanted to make, I've made in that previous contribution, so thank you very much.
Okay. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask how long these new trees will take to get to full cover and how likely they are all to survive?
Survival really depends upon the maintenance and how well they're looked after. The condition will require any trees that fail or die to be replaced. We usually ask for smaller whips to go in the ground rather than larger mature trees. Larger mature trees have a very low success rate and require a lot of maintenance. Unfortunately, on sites like this, the developers, you know, they finish the thing, they disappear, and it's difficult to get things maintained. So we ask for smaller trees to go in. I think it's important to remember that with tree planting, you know, we're taking a kind of a whole landscape approach. And in much the same way that many of the trees we enjoy today, the people who planted them are long gone, we're planting for future generations. So I'm not expecting these trees to be anything that any of us would probably enjoy at maturity, but, you know, we're kind of considering the landscape as it will be in 40, 50 years' time, because I would be asking for kind of native broadleaf, slower growing trees to go in so that they are going to have that kind of visual impact over time. So yeah, it will take a while for them to mature, but I think, you know, taking a whole landscape approach, I think that's the sensible way to go.
Okay, Paul. Okay, Sarah. Who's next?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little bit concerned about the mention of the word trespassing. I just wondered if our legal advisors could confirm the situation with the access to the site and the public rights of way.
As far as I'm aware, it's not actually registered as a public right of way, and it is just a private footpath. So it would be for the landowner to deal with any trespass. It wouldn't be any sort of issue for the council to deal with.
That's helpful, thank you.
Thanks. Is that scratching your nose or wanting to speak? Right, well, given where we are, you might not have long, so if you did want to come in, go on then, yeah. Go on.
It's about the condition I was thinking of, if that's okay, Chair, if I could indulge.
Yeah, of course.
So it's in terms of in condition 5, and I understand what Alan has just said about the planting of mature trees, but I think we're in a position where we can, make a positive change in towards the climate emergency as well, in condition to have more mature trees put in. Maybe not all of them, but certainly an amount. So I would like to suggest half of the trees that are proposed to be planted are mature, and the others are fruit trees or fruiting trees or things like that have been mentioned. But I would like to think we're in a position where we can make some real change, and I think that would be a good step to take.
Just as Sarah's ears pricked up at the word trespass, we've also heard the word sapling mentioned, whereas I'm more in James's space at the moment in terms of not quite like for like in terms of exact replication for the reasons you gave, but certainly some maturity to the replacements. How are we in the current conditions with ensuring that, which I think was where James was quite correctly coming from.
It's within the gift of the council really to specify anything we like on the landscape condition. We could certainly put in largest trees. We could put in kind of trees that are 6 to 8 inches across at chest height and 10 feet high. They will certainly have an instant impact. But you have to remember, when those trees are grown in the nursery, when they dig them up from the nursery, they cut away probably 80% of its root system, stick it in ground it hasn't grown in. It then has to be staked, underground tied so it doesn't blow over. It has to be watered every year, it has to be maintained, and it's a big undertaking. Absolutely, we can do that, and we can certainly tie a maintenance schedule in with the landscaping scheme, and it does give instant impact. It's just the success rates of them are far lower than with whips, but that's this committee's choice. Absolutely.
I forget who mentioned it, but that's a concern that you've just helped us with there in terms of ongoing maintenance. It's all very well to get the replacement trees planted, but then if they're ignored and nothing happens, it's not really worth our while.
My experience is that if there's a 5-year condition, developers will come along and they'll happily pull it out and stick another one in for 5 years and then disappear.
Okay, I've got Patrick and then Kathy, and then we're probably in a position, hopefully, to come to a conclusion. So
Thanks, Chair. Well, just on Councillor Stoneman's point, we could have a separate condition. I know Alan's just said you could tie it in with the same condition, but we have been known to have a landscape management plan as a separate freestanding condition. So I'd propose that we actually add a separate one in so that all the planting scheme is maintained. And then in the event that it's not maintained, then obviously the other condition of replacement would kick in. But a maintenance plan ought to be suggested, I'd recommend.
I think that would be the preferable way of doing it. Are we okay? Again, I don't want to come up with wording and horse trade words today, but I think we're okay for our officers to take that on board. We know what's been suggested. Kathy, and then that's probably going to be it. So, last word.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Patrick's last point. I also just wanted to question, really, how do you define a sapling?
It's a nursery specification. The sapling will go up to the size of 2 metre high. You get whips, feathered whips, and the largest one is a 2 metre high. So it's a single stem with little stems coming off it. So that's a sapling. Yeah, over and above that, they become standards and heavy standards. Sorry, it's boring watching this stuff.
No, we've learnt a lot today, and I think it was Patrick's question that teased that out first of all. So all of you with gardens, I expect high quality trees next time we're around after all we've been told today. So on the face of it, this should be quite a straightforward decision, but I think the history and the intricacies of the sites have merited the time we've spent on it. I think we have laid to rest some concerns, the trespassing and so on, and the explanation about this substation was really, really helpful. It's no surprise that we focused on the one tree, its replacements and how they're going to be managed, and I think it's been worth our while teasing all of that out. I think it's been a healthy debate with some really good questions. We've got the conditions agreed. in terms of part of the suggestion. I think they're robust and appropriate, and I think they're a model going forward. So with those protections, I think we're in a good space to agree to the proposal in the vote, which is to formally to vary the condition regarding the previous application. We do need to remind ourselves that planning permission has already been granted, both in terms of the principle of having 2 dwellings there and the reserve matters that, as we were reminded, could be built tomorrow without any comeback from us. So I think this is an improvement. The improvements to the environmental aspects are there and clear for all to see, and I think insisting on those is a very good thing. So the recommendation is to grant conditionally with the extra conditions that we've discussed and agreed. So I'm okay with all that. If we could move to the vote, please, from our colleagues. And that's agreed. So thank you very much for that, everybody. I think that was time well spent. Item number 7 is the list of applications. Does anybody have any issues to raise on those? If not, we will move on. We'll note those. Item 8 are the appeal decisions at page 49. Carly, is there anything trend or theme-wise that we need to be alive to? Any learning points or points of interest for the committee?
No, nothing this time. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, anything on the appeal decisions anyone wants to raise? No? Okay, we will note those. We have no exempt business, in which case I will close the meeting and wish you all a very pleasant 4 weeks and see you all in August. Thanks very much.